Hey guys, how's it going? So in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how I made this right here. And we're going to do some more 3D code stuff. I know it's been a while since I've dived into 3D code. So we're going to spend the entire time just like modeling, texturing, everything inside of 3D code. And stick around till the end and I'm going to show you guys how you can also make a quick turntable animation inside of Blender and have your work presented in a very nice and professional way. Before we get started, I do want to give a quick shout out to Alienminefield. He had a whole 27-part tutorial series on how to make an alien leech using 3D code. This video is kind of outdated, but then he had some really cool tools that he showcased. I pretty much just watched from part 1 till 17 because that's the part that covers the modeling and sculpting part. Everything after that focuses more on retopo. So if you're into retopology and you want to learn how to do it the right way for game-ready models, I highly recommend you check him out. But yeah, it's a pretty cool channel. Definitely gonna subscribe and be on the lookout. We're not gonna make the exact same thing, but as far as technique and process goes, once you know the process of this, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to make something really cool. Okay, so the first tool that I'm gonna showcase is gonna be the curves tool right here. So for the body of the leech up here, that's what I used. So you can just like click and just click, and then you can like scale these points up and down like that. With the right mouse button, you can click and drag and scale these points up and down. And if you middle click from your mouse, you can move these around. And you can like click anywhere on your curve to add more segments as well. So we can do something like this, scale this up a little bit. Maybe scale this up just to have like a nice smoother transition. Maybe I can pull this up, and I feel like this tool is so good if you're trying to get if you're trying to get some sort of organic shapes in. I feel like this tool is like really powerful. Now you got to be careful. If you just like click anywhere else, it's just going to continue making them. Control Z. So when you're done making your first shape, I would hit enter on your keyboard. Okay. And then you have like a mesh of some sort. So when you're making this, by default, the point where you start from, usually it's not circle, it's set to straight. And when you do that, you get this like flat edge. So in order to change that, I would highly recommend go to profile and change it to either hemisphere, or just mess around with all these and see which one you like. I think spike is a little bit too thin on the back. So we'll, it's really cool. So I would just keep it on hemisphere. Now for the mouth, he used a technique where he was able to literally use a cube and move the vertices around. I couldn't figure that out. So my fix to that was you make a new layer, use a cube right here. Okay. I'm just gonna reset my scale to main axis. Scale this up a little bit. Orthographic mode, just kind of like place it. Pretty much what I want to do is that I want to make it in such a way where like it's a triangular shape opening that way. I use the move tool. Before I do anything else, let me just turn on my symmetry. Hit pick from bound. Okay. And I'm just gonna use the move tool to kind of like just slowly shape it a little bit. I'm gonna pick an axis that I want it to like be flipped down, right? So if I go to pick, let's do pick, and I'm just gonna click right here. So now the plane is down there. Hit Alt X. And there we go. We have that at the bottom as well. Now I'm going to turn off my symmetry and kind of modify the bottom part a little bit. We'll use the pose tool. Just make a selection of this. Just going to scale it down. Okay. Now what I'm going to do next is we're going to go back to symmetry, x-axis. Shape this up a little bit more. Grab my move tool, just like move it around a little bit. Okay. So it's looking pretty shitty so far, but it's okay. What I'm gonna do next, let me just rename this layer. I'm gonna grab this. I'm gonna merge these two layers so that way I can like sculpt it and mix it up. So we're gonna go merge to body right here. We'll give it a sec. Next, I'm gonna use my fill tool. Let's see where fill is, right here. And then with that, I'm just gonna go ahead and just do this. That way it kind of like just blends it in. And we just want to like focus on the shape for now. We're not really like worried too much about the details and everything. It's very high dense, so I'm just gonna bring it down. Wow, it's 8 million already. I'll bring it down to like 1 million. So I can hold down shift and kind of like smooth this out a little bit also. Next I'm gonna grab the move tool again, just kind of like make this part right here. Just move this around like that, ever so slightly. It doesn't have to look exactly like what I'm making up here, honestly, but just to show you guys a little bit. Maybe we can make it a little bit more, just like go ham with this. And I come back with my build tool up here, and then holding control, I can kind of like do this kind of thing where I'm creating the mouth. Like the throat part, like maybe we'll have the teeth up here and whatnot. The next tool that we're gonna use the muscle tool. And if this red symmetry line gets a little bit distracting, you can always check the show symmetry plane button. And so it's still turned on, but it's just like, you know, it's hidden. So let's go and use the muscle tool next. I want to add some more like muscle up here, some more like muscle tendons and things like that, and a little bit of more volume up here. You could do that with build as well, but I feel like muscle makes it a little bit more better looking. Let's see, tube/muscles. So if you like do this, you get like that kind of thing, right? So what I'm gonna do is, with muscle, you can kind of like just do that kind of thing. Just like add stuff, and then just like smoothing it out. Next thing we're gonna do is we're actually gonna go ahead and show you like how I did this top part right here. We're gonna use muscle one more time, and what we're gonna do is we're really gonna like increase our strength for that. So let's go back up here. Like if I use a brush like a soft brush, if you do stuff like this, you get like that kind of thing happening up here. It's pretty cool. Let's go up a little bit more. So that looks pretty okay. Then we can grab the move tool again and just kind of like shape it up however we want to. So I'm just constantly like going back and forth between build and fill for the most part. And then, you know, I can definitely add more muscles, but right now I don't want to get too caught up into the details. Just add like a little bit of detail if you want, like kind of like do that kind of thing. Maybe I'll increase my strength a little bit. Or add like those bumps. If you hit hold down control, you can like sculpt inwards. So this could be a good time to add like some little bit of detailing up here and there, but I wouldn't like get too lost in it just yet. The other tool you can also use is the pinch tool. It looks pretty good. It kind of like pinches your vertices. It gets you like more like more fine lines if you want to, kind of like that. So it's really good. If you want, it's a little too early to use it in this case right now, but it doesn't hurt to put in like a few strokes here and there. And when you start detailing, I would recommend turning off your symmetry. That way, you know, it's not like completely symmetrical, because nothing in nature is completely symmetrical, right? So that's roughly kind of like how you would make that top part up here. Let's look at how I made these Gelsacs. So this right here. So this little cutout and then this circular part up here. So before we do that, I'm gonna go ahead and just like widen this out a little bit, this part of the body, so that like I can actually see it from the top and cut it properly. So just kind of like do this a little bit. It's so much fun. Okay. Now this is really cool. So if you go up here to primitives, and I'm gonna go ahead and use an ellipse right here. Okay. Let's just reset my axis. reset size. So I'm just gonna roughly bring it up to wherever I want to and kind of like shape it however I want to. Place it right. And then what I can do next is, let's rotate it. You see how like on the option it says add? If I hit subtract and press enter, it kind of like makes a cutout and it's like a perfect circle. Now I could, technically speaking, I could use the build tool and kind of just hold down control and do this kind of thing. But it's not as clean as like, I mean, it kind of works, but it's not as clean as using an ellipse. So I really like using this technique up here. And then you can always come up here with your build tool and kind of just soften this out. You know, either smooth it or kind of like just build around it a little bit. Add a little bit of imperfections. For the Gelsac itself, I can make a new layer up here and just use a primitive one more time. I think it's the same as using these up here. Use this. And so literally you would use the exact same technique to like do all three of these. I'm not gonna demonstrate that because I feel like it's gonna be a waste of time, but literally the exact same way. All right, so let's look at how I made these shells, these little hard shells on the skin up here. Oh, I think it's hidden. Oops. So these shells up here, there's a really cool tool called Wax Layer that I ended up using for this. Because the Wax Layer tool is so cool. Like what I can do if I click this tool right here. Now, there are a couple things you can do with this. So I can either like paint a part of my mesh, right? Like for example, something like this. And then here, if I hit apply, it kind of like creates this shell around it. Now, of course, it's not super thick right now. It's because I didn't mess around with the settings. But pretty much the layer offset is like the distance that it's gonna be away from the main mesh, and then the thickness of the whole thing itself. And if you hit control, you can like paint away your selection as well. Now, just like that, you can also use a 3D spline up here where you can get like more accurate curves and stuff. For example, you come up here, click and drag. We go like that. And press enter. And so it creates it this way, right, like that, which is pretty cool as well. If I hit escape, I can get rid of that selection. I personally like using the brush tool because I feel like I had more control that way. I do feel like you need like high poly, more subdivisions for it to work properly, but that's kind of like how I use for like those outer shell, like this tool right here. So let's go ahead and select like more of it up here. And then what I can also do, you see this little box here? I can like add points and edit points. So in edit points, I can literally just like click and drag these points and kind of like edit them however I want to. It's pretty cool. I'm gonna escape for now. Let's go back to the brush mode. So let's go up here for this one right here. Maybe I want all of this. It's kind of like, in a way, it's kind of like masking it. I feel like ZBrush has a similar tool where you can do this. So it's quite similar. And having symmetry turned on, it's gonna do it on the other side as well. And you can also invert your selection, which is pretty cool. So if I do this, it's gonna invert everything else except that part. So we'll go back for now. I'm gonna increase my thickness a little bit. Let's see. You just have to play around with these sliders and see what works the best for you. Hit apply. So this is what we end up getting. And then I can use the pose tool to kind of give the effect that the shell is kind of inside the skin of the creature, kind of like it's protruding outwards, just so that it feels like it belongs to the body a little bit more. And I'm just gonna do the same thing to the rest of the shells as well. And it's one of those things where you just gotta like sit down and just see what looks good or what doesn't look good. It just takes a little bit of time, but it's definitely worth it. Next, what I can do is that I can use the scrape tool to kind of like paint ever so slightly on the edges of the shells, just to add a little bit of imperfection, and also make sure I have soft selection unselected. And we're just gonna go ahead and just paint on the edges just a little bit, just so I have some sort of imperfections up there. You just have to like kind of go back and forth with it, and you know, see what's good or not. One thing I did realize that if I have the intensity is very high, it's a very sensitive tool, so you have to make sure the density is really low. If it's high, you kind of get your mesh starts breaking out a little bit, and you want to kind of avoid that. Next, I'm gonna use the curve tools again and just kind of make some sort of lips around the mouth of this creature. And I think I deleted that part, but sometimes when you use the curve tool a second time on your scene, you're probably gonna have to click the delete curve option because it has the previous curve saved before you can make another one. But I just want to make like some sort of like just lips of some sort where we can make some holes for the teeth, and then we can put like teeth inside of it. Once we get that part figured out, I can just use the build tool one more time and kind of just hold down control and make these little holes inside the gum where I'm gonna put some teeth in. So my recording kind of cut out on this part, but the way that I made those fangs, it was pretty simple. It was once again just done by using primitive shapes. Like I had a sphere, and then I had a cone on top of the sphere. And then from there, I used the pose tool to like curve it out a little bit just to get that effect. And from there, I used the clone tool to just like put them all over the place. And the same thing with the small teeth as well. I just like cut out a part of one of the fangs and kind of just modified it using the move tool and the build tool. And then once again, just kind of just placed it all over. So now we're reaching a point where we can start detailing our model. And when it comes to detailing, I found it really interesting, like how the guy from the tutorial, he told us to change from voxel to surface mode. And the reason for that was because when you're in voxel mode and when you're like sculpting, right, it's constantly adding voxels to your mesh, and sometimes it can be like very hard on your computer processing power. Also, the other thing is that, let's say if you like build up a little piece right here and you leave a piece in the middle, when you start building up on top of it again, like the build tool doesn't like fill up that tiny space, it just builds on top of it. And then you have to make a brush really small and then like individually paint it, like sculpt it again, and then use the smooth tool to smoothen it out. So it's kind of a process, right? But when you're working with the surface tools, what happens is that you're not dealing with voxels anymore. You're just dealing with your subdivision surface, like your polygons at that point, and you're just like pushing and pulling your polygons. And so what happens is that everything tends to be a lot smoother at that point. But then the one thing is also that you got to make sure you have enough subdivision surface, because if you don't have enough polygons, it's not going to work right. But it just works very smoothly. You see how like I can easily like add more detail and then like easily just like smooth it out without like having to go back and forth. So it's a very minor thing, and I'm not even sure if I'm explaining it right. But in my experience, when I converted it to surface, something that I've never done before in the past when using 3D Code, I did see a difference in like my quality of my sculpting. So I don't know how it's gonna be in the future when I start doing it in future projects, but right now for detailing it worked pretty nicely, not gonna lie. Using stencil is a good way to add detail, where you can just like choose one of these default images and then choose your build, change this to a rectangle, and then just like click and drag. This one looks pretty crazy because my strength was really high, but you can literally just do it in such a quick way, and then it's so quick, right? And so this is the part where we can just start detailing stuff. And I'm gonna pull my strength down a little bit and then like click and drag again, and so now it looks a little bit better. Hell, you can even do it to the whole model if you want. Just go ahead, click and drag with the build tool with the rectangular selection selected, give it a sec, and then you get like a little bit of detailing. And I'm gonna do it on the other side as well because I turned off symmetry because I'm an idiot, but it's okay. But at this point, it's more about just like detailing your model. You can either use stencils or you can use custom brushes for that. The dude in the video, he had like a whole reptile pack of some sort, which I couldn't find on 3D Code's website. But that was pretty cool. That's what he used. I'm just using the default stencils that came with 3D Code. And then after using these, you can always like hold down shift on your brush and like just paint on your models a little bit. That way you smoothen out some of the areas that might be getting too noisy. Let's go ahead and see like how I did the inside of the mouth. It was honestly, if I'm being honest with y'all, if I'm being 100% honest, it was a happy accident. I don't know how I got those curvy shapes, but what I did use the muscle tool one more time. So you just like, oop, that went, okay, yeah, let's try again. Oh yeah, make sure you turn symmetry on, and then just click and drag, and you get these like nice little ridges. And you just keep going until you get something, right? It looks pretty believable. I mean, I don't know what a leech in real life looks like, but looking at this, it looked pretty believable. And then once you had a good amount, I ended up switching back and forth between the fill tool and then the build tool, and then just like started building more. So here I was trying to like imitating like how maybe there's like some sort of like tentacles or something in his mouth. Maybe that's the tongue of some sort. I don't know. But just to add some more detail, some more interest in that area, and I use the muscle tool for that. So for detailing the Gelsac, it was done in a very similar way, honestly, and I used a variety of different brushes. It came from the default brush in 3D Code. I just wanted to add some veins of some sort, but I ended up using this brush that had like cracks in it, and it worked really nicely as well. It was giving the effect of like some veins popping out from that little area. And once again, just try to be mindful that your strength isn't too high, because then it extrudes out quite a lot and it just ends up looking weird. So you want to be careful with that part. Another super handy tool that I found out about is the freeze tool. So whatever you paint using the freeze tool, that area doesn't get affected by any more modeling, like any more detailing that I add. It won't affect that specific area. So if there are certain areas in your model that you want to restrict, or you don't want specific things to be on, this is really handy for that. It's almost like masking it in ZBrush. You see how like that brush didn't affect that black areas because it was shaded? So the freeze tool is definitely a good one. Like, I'm so glad I found out about that tool. The amount of things I could have made using that tool, man, in the past, oh my god. And then another helpful tool is also the draw tool. It only pops up in the surface mode, and I'm using it on the shell just to kind of give the effect that the shell is protruding out of the skin of this creature. And pairing that up with the smooth tool and the fill tool, you get like a nice little smoothing. Draw tool works pretty nicely as well. Another tool that's very handy is the snake tool. Like, you can like make these vein sort of things using it. It's really cool. It worked out really great. I've used it in the past for like trees and branches of some sort, and you can also change your profile to something else and just mess around with it and see which gives you a better result. And from here on out, it's just a matter of detailing it, you guys. Like, that's what's really important. Like, in the beginning, you want to make sure you just get all the shapes right. Always work low poly, and then once you're confident in your design, then you can start like adding details and all kinds of crazy things. So at this point we can start texturing our model, and texturing is another really fun tool that 3D Code offers, and it's really easy to use. You just gotta like fake it, and you'll know what I mean by that in just a few minutes. Okay, so the first thing that we're gonna do is that we're gonna make sure that symmetry is turned off on all my layers. You can check that by just clicking them and then hit S on your keyboard, and they were all turned off. And then what I'm gonna do first is that I'm gonna hit 2 global space, just so that it kind of resets the position of all my models, I want to say, of all my pieces. And once we have that figured out, then I can shift select all my layers, and I can hit retopo via decimation. Ideally you want to have your reduced poly count like less than 50k. I've noticed that usually works really well when it's within that range. Anywhere from 50k to 100k should be pretty good. Anything more than 100 gets a little bit too heavy on the system, or on my system at least. Alright, so this is our retopo room. Then I'm gonna hit edit. We're gonna do calculate curvature, leave everything by default, it should be good, and hit OK. Once that's done, I'm gonna go to edit again, and this time we're gonna hit calculate occlusion and leave everything by default and hit OK as well. And then after that we'll hit bake and then click on bake with normal maps per pixel and just hit OK. And then I think for me it's set to Blender by default, but I think it's something else when you're doing it the first time. So just make sure you change it to Blender on that first option where it says normal map preset, and then just change the size of your maps to 4K. Hit OK, give it a sec. So after we're done with that, we're gonna switch over from the sculpt room to the paint room, and this is where all the texture magic happens. And before we do anything, you'll see that we have a layers panel, and then we also have a sculpt tree panel. The sculpt tree panel was the panel where what we had from the very beginning. But from the layers panel, I'm gonna go ahead and start deleting all these extra layers. We don't need any of those layers up here, and then we're gonna hide everything from our sculpt tree. Now this is our retopoed mesh, and it has a normal map that's turned on, and it has an ambient occlusion map that's turned on. Now if you turn off your normal map, it's just like a really crappy looking model because it's decimated like very heavily, and it's that normal map that kind of brings back all those details that you spent so many hours working on, which is why it's very important to like bake your normal maps. And if you don't bake or decimate your model, and when you export it out into Blender, then it's just going to be very heavy poly, and Blender might not be able to like, you know, use it because it's just like so dense. So I like to start off with like a base texture of some sort. I downloaded this stone texture from 3D Code's website. They got tons of textures up there, so I definitely recommend downloading them. The default ones are pretty good as well. And you always want to make sure you right click on your material and you attach it to your layer, and then from your layer you right click on it and hit Smart Material Editor, and this is where like you can start tweaking your texture a little bit. You can, you know, mess around with the roughness, the scaling of your texture, the color of your texture, you know, all kinds of cool things. Then after selecting a base color, I was going for like a very muted color initially, and then I usually, if I'm being honest with you, I just like play around with the sliders until something cool happens. But I've noticed like the first 2 layers don't really have much going on in them. It's usually the third one that has most of the details. And this curve slider, if you like push it up or down, sometimes it affects your texture a little bit. But once again, that area wasn't active to begin with, so it wasn't really doing anything. The real magic happened when I went to the 3rd layer up here. And here I started like playing around with the depth and the roughness a little bit, seeing if I'm getting any cool results. Because I did want like some sort of like a wet look to this guy up here. And then if you end up clicking on that little logo on the left, and you pull this slider up or down, this curve slider, and you can scale down the texture as well, this is where like something cool started happening. So I did that. It looked pretty sick. It was looking pretty nice. Once I kind of liked the way this looked, it was time to just like apply it to my model. So the fastest way to like apply texture is using the fill tool, and then just change to a brush. I think it's set on brush by default, and just click on your model, and then just give it a sec. Next, I wanted to add some glossiness, so I turned off the depth and color, and I used like a brush of some sort, a texture brush, and you see how like I'm adding a little bit of shine to this dude, and it's more just like to give that wet effect to him, because I feel like I use that stone texture as a base, and it's kind of acting like a skin texture. So you know what I meant like earlier when I said that we're gonna have to like fake it a little bit. So even though I'm using a stone texture, it still looks like a skin texture with a little bit of like dirt here and there, and then I'm gonna add like a little bit of glossiness just so that it shows that it's, you know, wet and slimy. Also, you want to make sure you make a new layer when you do all this, and right now I'm just like painting glossiness as opposed to just like adding material to it. So I wasn't really vibing with the pink anymore, so I ended up changing the color to more like a yellow brownish tone, more like a muddy tone of some sort. And you can simply do that by just right clicking the layer that has that material and open up your smart material attributes, and you can just tweak it and then save it when you're done. For the Gelsacs, I used a metallic texture since I wanted it to be like very nice and shiny, and this material right here worked like perfectly in my case. And I was also like looking up my references very closely just to make sure I match it as close as possible. So it's always nice to have some sort of like references that we can like match it. And on the top, I was also like turning off my gloss and seeing how that was looking. I was turning off my depth as well, seeing how that was looking. I was turning off my color as well. So usually I like play around and see what's looking nice and what's not. It's just like this experimentation phase. But that's pretty much it. Like when it comes to texturing, I just like keep selecting textures. I'll like preview them. If it looks good, I'll add it. If it doesn't, I'll choose a different one. And then whenever the fine detailing, and when it comes to like to the fine detailing part, then I usually just grab a brush and like paint on it. Now, while still on that same layer, I can also switch over to my brush tool and I can actually like paint that specific texture. I thought it'd be cool if I had a little bit of fall off on the skin itself from the gel sack, just to kind of add a little bit of shade up there and just add like a little bit more interest. The part where like these little shells and gel sacks were extruding out from the skin, I thought it'd be nice if I just like add some extra color just to like have some more interest up there. For the bottom part of the leech, I made a new layer, and since I wanted it to be a darker color, I ended up changing the blend mode to multiply, and then from there I turned off my sorry, I was experimenting at this phase right now. I used the pick tool to color pick the color of the leech, and then just seeing if it was looking nice or not, experimenting a little bit, and then I ended up turning off my my depth. That way I only get the color and the glossiness. Because when you have depth turned on, it adds like normal map detail on it, and I don't necessarily wanted it on this area. It's really good. Like that kind of detail is really good for like skin pores and textures and veins and things like that. Because it's not like modeling information. It's more like normal map information, and so you can add like more details. And then here I just like lowered down my opacity and I just tried to like blend in a little bit the color. And then for the shells, I pretty much reused the same texture for the skin, and I just played around with the settings a little bit more. I noticed that when I brought down the scaling on this right here, it looked pretty sick. Like, look at that. It was like free detail right up there. I think that was the scaling of the normal map. I think it was roughness. It was either roughness or displacement map. I can't really remember what it was. So honestly, that's what I've been kind of doing with texturing. I just like go over my material library and just see whichever works. If I can make it work, I make it work. I just pull the sliders left and right, see if it's getting the effect that I want to get. And from there, it's just all about experimenting. And then I try to add like different color hues, different, hue shifts here and there, just so that I can add more interest. And then once again, I would go back and add a little bit more glossiness as well. So it's a little bit of, it's a bit of a process, if I'm being honest with you guys. But if you like texture your models a couple times, you should be able to get the hang of it. Like, texturing is really, it's very user friendly in 3D code. I am, however, not sure if you can like use your own textures where you can like save out images from textures.com and do it. I'm pretty sure you can. I haven't tried that part, so that's something that I'm very curious to try out in the future. But yeah, here I'm just painting a little bit of red. Thought it'd be cool to have like some red color, like skin red. Kind of makes sense, I guess. I don't know. And then for the teeth, I straight up just used a metal texture because I don't know, I want like the teeth to be like nice and shiny, and also kind of gives the effect that it's wet a little bit. So once again, just going through my library, seeing something if I like or not, playing around with the scaling, and that's about it, you guys. Wanted to add some extra detail on the teeth, so I changed my tool to the mode where you can just like click and drag different brushes on it. And so I thought it'd be a cool way to add like a little bit of noise on the teeth, just to add some extra interest. So definitely, it's like texturing in 3D code. It's kind of like you just have to play around with it. I mean, I've been playing around with it for an year now, and I feel like I finally got a hang of it. But it's not difficult. You just have to dedicate a little bit of time. Hopefully this video helps, just like breaking it down. So I switched over to the render tab next, and this is what the rendering inside of 3D code looked for the model so far. It looks pretty nice. I mean, I really like it, but in order to like really push it, it's really nice if you take this model to Blender, add a whole lighting setup, and then render it that way. Because in that way you have like more control over your lighting. You can create more drama and more intensity with lighting, and that's what I usually like to do. So we're gonna export our objects and textures, and then we're gonna choose output mesh. Is gonna ask you where you want to save it, find the folder you like where you're gonna save it. Then we're gonna go and find a path where we can save our textures, and then make sure we set it to Blender cycles. Here I'm gonna get rid of the displacement and emissive part because I'm not really gonna use them in my texture node. And then from there, we're just gonna hit export and go to file, import, and import FBX. Oh yeah, by the way, you wanna save your 3D code model as an FBX. OBJ works too, but FBX works a little better. And it does come with like the texture built in, but the issue that I have is that whenever I try to render inside of Eevee with the render passes, it doesn't read it for some reason. So I usually have to like delete all my textures and then retexture it for it to work. And I've been in a situation where like I've made like a whole environment scene, and then I did not like retexture it that way, and it would just like not read it. Like my mist pass would be all messed up, my bloom pass would be all messed up. So anyways, when you bring this into Blender, I'm gonna go to the material tab and just like remove the materials. And then we're gonna select everything and hit Ctrl J so that it's all like one mesh. From here, we'll add a new material, and then the textures that we exported out from 3D code, we're just gonna put those up here. After texturing it, I'm pretty much just gonna use an HDRI and set up my camera, and then just start rendering it. So next we're gonna create a turntable animation from here, and it's really simple. I mean, I didn't know how simple it was to make a turntable animation, so you don't want to miss that part out. Alright, so I created a plane where I just put in some concrete texture, then we're gonna use a plane axis and an empty axis, right? And this empty axis is what I'm gonna rotate, and then I'm gonna parent my camera to that axis so that the camera rotates with it. So I'm gonna select my empty, hit I, and click on rotation. That way it adds a keyframe. Make sure my slider is on the first keyframe. I'm gonna pull it down to 150, like halfway down, and I'm gonna rotate it to 180 degrees. Press I again, click on rotation to add a keyframe. Then we're gonna move our slider to our last keyframe, 300. From there, I'm gonna change the Z value to 360. I again, click rotation. So now I have 3 keyframes, one on 0, one on 150, and one on 300. Now when you play it, you see that your empty starts rotating. Now I'm gonna open up my graph editor. I'm gonna click my empty. From here, I'm gonna select the middle keyframe and just delete it. And then we're gonna select everything, press V and select vector. That we get like a constant rotation without it slowing down or anything. I'm gonna click my camera, I'm gonna click my plane axis, and I'm gonna hit P and click the second option. And so now the camera is parented. So now when you hit the play button, you'll see the camera revolving around your model. So I ended up cutting my animation into half because I felt like it was rotating like really slowly. So we're just gonna set the camera one more time, and so just like move my keyframes by like half the amount. So the keyframe that I had on 150 is now on 75. The keyframe that I had on 300 is now on 150. And I'm just like, so now we're gonna go to render settings. Okay. I'm gonna make sure you click on the output folder and select the folder where you want to save your movie. And we'll change the file format to FMPG video. I think by default it's on PNG. You want to change it to the other option. And then under encoding container, we'll change it to MPEG4. By default, I think it's on something else. Don't remember. And that's about it. So let's go render. Click on render animation. Wait 10,000 years, and then your animation is complete, my friends. Alright, you guys, so that should be all for today. Thank you so much for coming by and watching this video. I appreciate every single one of y'all. And we're gonna keep doing more 3D code stuff. I know this was more like a study for me, so I do want to like use the techniques and the skills that I learned in making this and make something that's my own. I do want to make something more creature related because it's Halloween season and I have like this really cool portfolio piece in mind that I want to work on. And so yeah, just stay tuned for that. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.